I can see familiar faces.
Evet.
Okay, just one person is waiting. All right, all of you are here now. Welcome again. Let's start. You can all hear me, I guess. Can I see some nods at least? Perfect. Welcome. Welcome to the Social Policy Seminar entitled Why Do We Need a Human Rights Approach to Mental Health? And this is Volkan Yılmaz. I'm the director of the Social Policy Forum at Boğaziçi University. And I'll be moderating this webinar. I'll be speaking in English, but I would like to share a short note in Turkish with Turkish-only speakers. So English speakers, please bear with me for a moment. Hoş geldiniz herkes. Eğer yalnızca Türkçe konuşuyorsanız ve İngilizce konuşmuyorsanız sizden Zoom'da Almanca seçeneğini işaretlemenizi rica edeceğim. Mesut Bey hariç diğer iki konuşmacımız ve ben İngilizce konuşacağız. Dolayısıyla tercümanlarımız sağ olsunlar eş zamanlı olarak size konuşulanları Türkçe aktaracaklar. Şimdi ben tekrar İngilizceye dönüyorum. Thank you for your patience. Welcome again. We as Boğaziçi University Social Policy Forum organized this seminar with World Health Organization Country Office for Turkey to celebrate the United Nations Public Service Day through a discussion on one of the key but still underappreciated issues for human well-being in our contemporary world, which is mental health. So our aim today is to contribute to a human rights understanding of mental health with three presentations. As some of our audience may already be aware, the relationship between human rights and mental health is a reciprocal one. So while human rights violations often lead to deterioration of mental health interventions sometimes result in human rights violations. So in order to discuss these issues, we have three distinguished speakers with us today. I would like to first introduce them shortly before leaving the floor to them. Our first speaker will be Mesut Demirdoğan, an expert by experience. Mesut is a Turkish human rights activist in mental health. He is currently the head of Istanbul-based Association of the Friends of Schizophrenia, and Association of the Friends of Schizophrenia is the first association established on mental health and human rights in Turkey, as far as we know. So our second speaker is Michelle Funk. Michelle is the unit head of Policy, Law and Human Rights at the WHO's Department of Mental Health and Substance Abuse. Last but not least, we have Dan Chisolm'un. Dan is the program manager for mental health at the WHO Europe. So what we are going to hear today is quite comprehensive. We will start from the lived experiences of Mesut as a mental health service user and an activist in Turkey. Then we'll continue with Michelle's talk on the key areas of work that we have to focus in order to transform services, policy, and law in mental health using a human rights-based approach. And then Dan will take from there and tell us about the European experiences of putting human rights into practice in mental health with the support of the WHO. So we feel very privileged to host these three influential speakers in mental health and human rights field today. On behalf of Boğaziçi University and WHO Turkey Country Office, I would like to thank them all for being with us today. Before leaving the floor to our first speaker, I'd like to share with you some logistical information about the webinar. We are not planning to give any breaks between our three speakers, so we will move directly from one speaker to another, and we will receive questions at the end of all three presentations. But if you would like to ask a question to our speakers, please write your question in the chat box to me that is better. If you can just find me, Volkan Yılmaz, and then send your messages directly to me in English or in Turkish. I will collect all the questions and ask them to our speakers during the question and answer session. We are planning to spend 35 minutes for presentations, and then we will have a half an hour for questions and answers at the end of this webinar. Okay, so that's all from me. I'd like to now leave the floor to Mesut. Mesut Bey, sizinle başlayabiliriz.
Herkese selamlar. Bazı tanıdığım arkadaşlar görüyorum. Onlara da selamlar. Sesim duyuluyor mu acaba? Tamam. Ben Mesut Demirdoğan. Şizofreni Dostları Derneği Dernek Başkanıyım. Yaklaşık 20 yıldır Şizofreni Dostları Derneği'ni yönetiyorum. Dernekle ilintim aynı zamanda kronik şizofreni tedavisi görmem. Hastalığımda 30 yıl evvel başladı şizofreni tanısıyla. Hastane yatışlarıyla, kurumlardan destek almam 30 yıl evvel başladı. Ve 30 yıldır tedavim devam ediyor. Halen de devam etmekte. Şimdi dernekten biraz bahsedeceğim ama ondan evvel hastalığımın ilk başladığı yıllarda ne tür hizmetler alıyordum, onlardan biraz bahsedeyim. Daha doğrusu ne tür hizmetler alamıyorduk yani. Onlardan bahsetmek istiyorum. Sadece ilaç tedavisine dayalı bir hizmet vardı. Ve gidiyordunuz polikliniklerde, size ilaç yazılıyordu, evinize gidin. İlaçlarınızı kullanın, bir ay sonra tekrardan kontrole gelin denirdi bize. Biz de o şekilde evimize giderdik, ilaçlarımızı kullanırdık. Bir hafta, 10 gün, bir ay sonra tekrar kontrole giderdik. Ve bunun dışında hastalıkla ilgili hiçbir destek almıyorduk o dönemde, 30 yıl evvel. Bu bizim yaşantımızı tabii olumsuz yönde etkiliyordu. Hastalık nedir? Hastalıkla nasıl başa çıkarız? Ailem hastalık hakkında bilgisi yok. O dönemler internet ulaşımı da yoktu. Hastalığımız hakkında hiçbir bilgi alamıyorduk. Böyle bir boşluk içindeydik ve 2000'li yıllarda bir gazete haberinde bir Şizofreni Dostları Derneği olduğunu haber aldım ve telefon numarasını not ettim. Derneğin bana faydası olabileceğini düşünmüştüm. Çünkü şizofreniyle ilgili ulaşabileceğim başka hiçbir şey yoktu. Bilgi alacağım. Ve derneğe telefon ettikten sonra gittim ve tanıştığım derneğe üye oldum. O bir dönüm noktasıydı benim için. Hastalığımı yaşayan başka insanlarla tanıştım ve bize yardım edecek gönüllü insanlarla tanıştım. Şizofreni serüveni bende aslında bu şekilde başladı derneğe üye olmamla birlikte. O dönem derneğimizi doktorlar, psikiyatrlar yönetiyordu. Kendi aramızda hastalar sonra örgütlenmeye başladık. Bu dernek bizim. Derneğimizi biz yönetelim. Hastalar ve yakınları yönetsin. Doktorlar yönetmesin diye bir fikir oluştu. Sonra önümüzdeki birkaç yıl içinde bir seçim oldu dernekte genel kurul. Ve orada aday olduk. Hastalar ve hasta yakınları. Ben de başkan olarak aday oldum. Ve seçimi kazandık. Doktorlar, psikiyatrlar kaybettiler ve asli görevlerine döndüler onlar. Ve 20 yıldır da derneği hasta ve hasta yakınları yönetiyor. 20 yıllık bir dernek deneyimim var. 30 yıllık hastalık deneyimim var. Hiç hizmet almadığımız dönemi biliyoruz. Bugün mevcut olan hizmetleri biliyoruz. Onlarla ilgili bir mukayese yapacağım. Ülkemizde dediğim gibi yani o yıllarda 80 sonlarında psikiyatri adına, destek adına, sosyal hizmet, rehabilitasyon bunların adı bile geçmiyordu, konuşulmuyordu. Bu kurumlar yoktu Türkiye'de. Sonrasındaki yıllarda bazı gelişmeler oldu ruh sağlığı hizmetlerinde. Dernek sürecinde aslında buna çok katkısı var bu gelişimlerde. Dediğim gibi derneklerin önemi fark edilmeye başlandı ve biz İstanbul'da ilk derneğiz, Şizofreni Dostları Derneği. Bizden sonra Ankara, İzmir, Eskişehir, Konya, diğer illerde de dernekler kurulmaya başlandı. Ve hak taleplerimiz olmaya başladı. Avrupa'yı da bu arada takip ediyoruz. Verilen hizmetlerden bilgimiz var. Dernekte, toplantılarda falan öğrendiğimiz bilgiler. Farkına vardık. Bize bir hizmet verilmediğinin farkına vardık ve talep etmeye başladık. Devletin de ciddi yaklaşımları oldu bu konu üzerinde ve bazı olumlu gelişmeler oldu son yıllarda. Örneğin bizi dinler hale geldiler uzmanlar. Sosyal yardımlarda şizofreni tedavisi görenlerin ve özürlülerin sosyal yardımlarında bir iyileşme söz konusu oldu bu yıllar içinde. Şizofreni adına ise toplum sağlığı merkezleri açılmaya başlandı. Rehabilitasyon destekleri verilmeye başlandı. Onun dışında İşkur, yani iş bulma konusunda resmi kurum olan İşkur bizi ciddiye almaya başladılar. Böyle bir gelişim oldu ve tırmanışa geçti bu tür destekler. Ama yeterli değil bunlar, halen de yeterli değil. Bunları anlatmak için ben buradayım. Dediğim gibi bazı sosyal yardımlarda iyileşme var, destekler var ama tam anlamıyla sosyal hayata katılmamız için verilen destekleri yetersiz buluyorum şu an için. Ve onlarla ilgili birikimlerimiz var. Dernekteki arkadaşlarımızla, derneğin uzmanları tarafından tespit ettiğimiz bazı sorunlar var. Onları da paylaşmak, bilirkişi insanlarla paylaşmak ve onu yetkili organlara taşıyabilmek gerekiyor. Ve bir lobi oluşturmamız gerekiyor. Bireysel olarak bir şeyleri söylediğimizde pek kabul görmüyor. Bir lobimiz olursa, ortak bir akıl olursa bizim talep ve isteklerimiz çok belli. Onları biz o şeyle yetkili insanlara taşıyabiliriz birlikte. Ana sorunlarımızın başında stigma geliyor. Damgalama dediğimiz bir olgu var. Çalışma hayatımızı etkiliyor, aile ilişkilerimizi etkiliyor. Birçok alanda bizi etkiliyor. İş bulamıyoruz. Kendi ayaklarımızın üzerinde duramıyoruz. Mesela ciddi olarak bağımsız yaşam hakkımız yok. Anneye babaya bağımlı olarak yaşıyoruz. Onların da yaşlı olduklarını düşünürsek, onların da sosyal hakları var. Onların belki yaşam kalitelerini biz bozuyoruz. Bir onursuzluk yaşıyoruz orada. Başkalarına yük olmak gibi. Bunları aşmak istiyoruz Türkiye'de şimdi. Onunla ilgili girişimlerde bulunmak lazım. Yani sosyal yardım almak, iş konusunda destek bulmak ve bağımsız yaşam için şartların oluşturulması gerekiyor. Kişiler toplumdaki yerlerini alabilmesi, özgüvenini kazanması, onurlu bir yaşamı elde etmesi için gelirlerin olması lazım ve olanakların olması lazım, barınma olanakları. Ben 50 yaşında bir kronik şizofreni hastasıyım ve hala anne babayla birlikte kalıyorum. Hala tek başına bir evde kalma özlemi bende var. Ve bütün arkadaşlara da bunu hissediyorum. Çoğunun buna ihtiyacı var. Bu tür desteklerin alınması, çalışma imkanları yaratılması daha çok. Dediğim gibi bazen devlet toplu konutlar yapıyor devlet eliyle. O konutlardan bize kontenjan ayrılması, e, dezavantajlı gruplara, engellilere, işte zihinsel engellilere, ruhsal rahatsızlığı olanlara o yapılan binalarda kotaların verilmesi gerekiyor. Bir de işverenlerin mevcut bir yasamız var. %100 eleman çalıştıranın 3 veya 7 tane engelli çalıştırması gerektiğine dair bir sistem var. O pek uygulamada değil. Bazı iş yerleri biz size maaşınızı verelim, hiç çalışmaya gelmeyin. Aydan aya maaşınızı alın gibi bir yaklaşım var. Biz kendimizi hani bu tür acındıran şeylerin içinde bulmak istemiyoruz. Çalışarak, çalışma gücümüz varsa çalışarak gelir elde etmek ve yaşama katılmak istiyoruz. Kimse bizi tecrit etmeden, onursuz bir yaşam istemiyoruz. Hakkımız olanı almak, çalışıyorsak çalışabilmek, çalışamıyorsak onun yardımını devletten alarak özgüvenle toplum içinde yaşamak istiyoruz. Zaten hastalığın verdiği ciddi bir sıkıntı, sorun var. Bir de sosyal hayatta bu tür şeylerle karşılaştığımızda acılarımız kat ve kat artmaktadır yani. Bu tür şeyleri çözebilirsek sorunlarımızı, ruh sağlığı yasamız yok mesela, gelişmiş bir ruh sağlığı yasamız yok. Bir şizofreni hastası evlenebilir mi tam olarak? Ehliyet alabilir mi? Araba kullanabilir mi? Mesleğini icra edebilir mi? Kredi alabilir mi? Bu tür konularda çok boşluklar var. Hatta vesayet konusunda çok sıkıntılar yaşıyoruz. Bize güvenilmiyor. Biz neyiz yani? Sözümüz geçiyor mu? Bazı ağır tedavi gören arkadaşlarımız var, vesayet altında yaşayan, başkasının vasi olduğu durumlar var. Orada vasiliğin kötüye kullanılması gibi sorunlar var. Hiçbir aile desteği olmayanların kurumlara gönderilmesi gibi durumlar var. Birçok konular var. Bunların farkındayız, çözüm yollarını biliyoruz. Bir de bu hastalık yeti kayıplarına neden olduğu için sosyal çevrenizi kaybediyorsunuz. Yaşamla irtibatınız kopuyor. Onun tekrar sağlanabilmesi için bazı örnekler duyuyoruz Avrupa'da, gelişmiş ülkelerde. Yaşam koçluğu diyorduk biz eskiden. Şimdi akran desteği diyorlar. O tür bir desteği mutlak almamız gerekiyor. Çünkü gerçekten hani kronik hastalar toplumdan koptuktan sonra o ilişki yetilerini kaybediyorlar. Onu kazanmak için de en güzeli bence akran desteği. Daha e, önemli bence birçok şeyden, resmi psikolojik destekten daha önemli. Akran desteğiyle hayata katılması, belli bir program dahilinde tabii mutlaka uzmanlar buna karar verecekler. Bu tür yaklaşımlarla bu sorunu çözüp rahat bir hayat yaşamak, bizim vizyonumuz bu. Kaliteli bir hayat yaşamak istiyoruz. Hasta da olsak kaliteli ve onurlu bir yaşama hakkımız var. Bunun dernekte savunuculuğunu yapıyoruz zaman zaman gücümüz yettiği kadar. Dediğim gibi hani paylaşabileceklerim bunlar. Deneyim olarak dernekte işte yıllardır, 20 yıldır yüzlerce şizofreni tedavisi görmüş arkadaşım var, yakınları var. Uzmanlarımızla sürekli konuşuyoruz. Biz konuya çok hakimiz. Yalnız bunları resmi kurumlara taşımak, yetkili kurumlara taşımak konusunda uzmanlara ve iyi bir ekibe ihtiyacımız var. Bu bir kere gidilerek istenilen bir şey değil. Bir lobi oluşturmak ve o lobinin sürekli belli aralıklarla taleplerimizi resmi kurumlara taşımak ve takipçisi olması gerekiyor. Dünyanın hiçbir yerinde her şey dört dörtlük değil. Ülkemizde de böyle. Bu sorunları ancak işte bu tür gruplarla birlik içinde aşabileceğimizi düşünüyorum. E, Bunlar aşılırsa biraz daha acılarımız hafifleyecek. Onu belirtmek istiyorum. Şimdilik teşekkür ediyorum.
Çok teşekkürler Mesut Bey. Thank you very much Mesut. We'll directly move to Michelle. Michelle, could you please mute yourself? Yes, perfect.
Well, thank you very much. I want to thank you for the invitation to join this webinar. I'm very grateful for the opportunity to speak on the topic of transforming services, policy and law using a human rights-based approach. So thank you very much to the organisers at Bosphorus University for the invitation. I'm also very grateful to Mesut Demirdoğan. Sorry for not pronouncing your name correctly, but I think your presentation was just so important. It's important to have that perspective from the real life perspective. And I think really your presentation summarized all the key issues and all the key challenges that we face in the area of mental health. In fact, you'll hear me in my presentation maybe repeating or emphasizing the same issues that you talked about. And interestingly, I'm sure you've seen so many changes in the dialogue and the perspectives from the full 20 years that you've been engaged in this work. So, at some stage, it'll be very nice to talk with you about, the changes in your own perspective. Thank you very much. I'd like to start by commenting on some of the major upheavals that we've seen lately. Firstly, the impact of COVID-19 shows no signs of abating anytime soon and has really brought home the need for governments to substantially increase their investment in mental health. Secondly, we've seen major demonstrations in the US and other countries around the world demanding an overhaul and reform of the police system and its use of coercion. Similarly, there have been calls for the last several years now to reform the mental health system and to also end its use of coercive practices. So we need to urgently rethink the mental health system currently in place in countries in order to move towards a system based on respect for the person and respect for human rights and dignity. mental health services in countries around the world are failing people, and much of this is related to the human rights issues. We continue to see numerous publications and reports from countries, from the UN, from NGOs and the media, highlighting that people with mental health conditions or psychosocial disabilities experience extensive violations and discrimination. So, as we've heard, many people are unable to access mental health services, let alone services that respect and promote their rights. In the healthcare context, it's common for people to experience violence, abuse, and neglect. People are often given disempowering messages by services that take away hope and dignity. For example, that they will not be able to finish their education or studies. They're told that they're not capable of making decisions for themselves, that they should not have hopes and goals because if they fail to achieve them, their condition will deteriorate. In the community, as we've heard, people are actively discriminated against and excluded from education, excluded from employment, from housing and social services. And as has already been introduced, we have substitute decision-making laws in nearly all countries. It's starting to change now, but these laws severely restrict people from making decisions on all aspects of their lives, about their treatment, about how they spend their money, about where they want to live and so on. And in a sense, these decisions that we make about our life is what allows us to live our life. It's what allows us to be human. So if we are to seriously address these human rights issues, it's going to take much more than a discrete human rights project or intervention in a country. Human rights needs to inform and lead all actions that are taken for policy, services and practices. And this is what we're aiming to achieve through the World Health Organization's Quality Rights Initiative, which has 4 main areas of work. One of the key areas is to build capacity of all stakeholder groups to promote human rights and recovery approaches. When you think about it, human rights in the mental health field still remains a very vague concept in people's minds. So we really need to implement capacity building that makes human rights concrete and actionable in practice in the mental health field. And I think this has been missing for some years, even though the conversation about human rights has been happening in mental health, it hasn't been so actionable. We are super happy in this regard to have launched last year a series of training materials which does this and which has demonstrated effectiveness in changing attitudes and practices towards a human rights-based approach. So this is the quality rights, the WHO quality rights training and guidance materials. We have demonstrated the effectiveness of these materials in low, middle and high income countries and across many different stakeholder groups. So health workers, policymakers, people with lived experience, civil society, secondary schools even, which is extremely important, universities, and the community at large. We've also developed the Quality Rights e-training platform that builds on the training materials and which can literally reach thousands of people in and across countries and change attitudes and practices on a large scale at minimum cost. And this is when you want to change the standard norms or the standard framework, society norms in the country, literally you have to reach all the stakeholder groups and you have to reach, the majority of people in order to get sustainable change. So this is really important. As some of you or many of you may know, participating in this webinar, the e-training platform has been translated into Turkish, amongst other languages, and it's being rolled out throughout the country. So we really encourage all of you to complete the training and to share it with other people, so as many people as possible. A second key area of work is to create community-based services and supports that respect and promote human rights and a person-centered recovery approach. To end institutionalization, it is clear that countries need to put in place a full range of services that meet people's needs. Services need to encourage people to make their own decisions about their treatment, care, and support. And the services also need to learn to respect these choices that people make. They need to also provide a person-centered, holistic approach addressing all important areas of a person's life, including relationships, work, family, and education, rather than having a narrow focus on symptom reduction. Services also need to put in place strategies to end the use of coercive practices such as seclusion and restraint. And of course, we also need services that do not tolerate any form of physical, sexual, and emotional abuse. Through the Equality Rights Initiative, we're working to support countries to assess and transform their existing services using the Equality Rights Assessment and transformation tools that we've developed. We are also currently developing a document that highlights good practice services from around the world, services that do not use coercion, and services that are promoting rights and recovery. And, you know, if we can show that these types of services exist and that they're effective, we're going to be able to convince and inspire policymakers and other actors to adopt these types of services in their country. The third area of the initiative is around supporting civil society movements. People with lived experience can be key drivers of change and should be supported in this role. They need to be invited to sit at the table to discuss policy, to discuss law, to provide their perspective and to express how their lives are impacted. And they should also be engaged to co-develop services, to co-develop training, and to be actively engaged in their delivery. So essentially, all actions in mental health are going to fall short if countries don't take these actions, if they don't listen to the people who are receiving the services, because they know the best of what is happening, what is helping them and what is not helping them. So through the Equality Rights Initiative, we've developed several guidance documents to promote this engagement with civil society. And we also directly work with civil society in everything that we do. So now to the fourth area of work. We have recently kickstarted the development of new guidance for countries on policy and law, which will replace some of the old guidance that we developed on these issues, which was formulated before coming into force of the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. This is the latest human rights conventions that gives very clear guidance on what needs to be happening in policy and law and services. Basically what we're looking at in this new guidance is, you know, how do we replace provisions on involuntary admission and treatment with provisions that promote supported decision-making and advanced directives. Laws also need to include provisions to end seclusion, restraint, and other coercive measures. So how are we going to do that? And that's the guidance that we're going to be providing. Also, policy and law need to explicitly promote community inclusion, participation, empowerment. So this will be central features of the new guidance. Probably this is going to be the most challenging aspect of our work. And this is because it requires a fundamental change to the legal processes in place in countries at the moment, and indeed processes that have been in place for decades. Although we don't yet have examples of any perfect laws in countries, some countries have recently developed legislation that is going in the right direction. So for example, Spain, Peru, the Philippines, Georgia, and India have developed legislation recently that promotes the right to legal capacity for people to make their own decisions, which specifically includes provisions around supported decision-making and advanced directives. And so this is really positive. It's really positive steps of countries, and there's a lot of interest now in countries to also, move the agenda forward. Even though, the countries that I've mentioned are moving in the right direction, and they've developed more progressive laws, their laws do have their shortcomings, and there's still a long way to go before being fully compliant with the international human rights standards. Now, just very briefly, moving to the topic of country implementation. Quality rights has been implemented in over 30 countries over the last few years. And right now there are 10 countries undertaking widespread, comprehensive and national level quality rights initiatives, including Ghana, Kenya, Philippines, Lebanon, Armenia, Bosnia and Herzegovina, Czechia, Estonia, and of course, Turkey is included in this group of countries. The results to date have been really impressive. As an example, since March 2019 in Ghana, over 7,000 people have successfully completed the Quality Rights e-training course and received a WHO, a World Health Organization certificate. Also of note, the e-training is being integrated into continuing professional development and course curriculum, and this is going to help ensure sustainability over the long term. There are many other very interesting and motivating results, but I don't have the time to go into the detail. But what I would like to do now is to end my presentation by calling on everyone who is participating in this webinar to take an active role in quality rights through, as I've already said, completing the Quality Rights e-training as a first step. Be familiar, know it inside out. Secondly, sending the e-training link to family, friends, and colleagues so that they complete the e-training as well. Spread the quality rights messages of dignity and human rights, and also really to be an active advocate in every way that you can. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Michelle, for this inspiring talk. By the way, we will send you the link for quality rights module for Turkish to all participants registered in this webinar. So if you're interested, we will send you the link so that you can log in. Okay, so I'll leave the floor to Dan, and he appeared with his presentation. Okay.
Yes. Dan. Just a moment. Can you see this okay?
Yes.
I just try and make it bigger. There we go. So great. Thanks very much, and good afternoon, everybody. Thank you very much for this invitation to participate and contribute to this webinar. Delighted to join this group this afternoon. And what I can do is build on both what Misha was just saying, but also what Mesut was talking about at the beginning of the webinar from his personal experience of difficulties that he's experienced in accessing services, being able to live a independent and dignified life. So what I thought I could do is first slightly broaden it and look at human rights as one of a number of critical principles or criteria that are relevant in thinking through public mental health issues and policies. But also then going to more examples of how this can actually be implemented and promoted on the ground, both in national context like your own in Turkey, but also more broadly. And of course, Michelle already talked about the Quality Rights Initiative, and so I will also say something about that and how we've used the materials and to good effect in the European region. So let me start with this key principles and approaches, as this is, I think, a good place to start, because of course human rights is a critical aspect in both in health policy, but also more broadly in public policy. But of course, it's not the only criterion that decision makers, policy makers, and all of us, use to come to decisions, make priorities, and so on. When we think about the public health space, there are a number of criteria here which are commonly brought up and used by decision makers. Obviously, there's one around the what I call the size of the problem. So the extent of the epidemiological burden of disease. So, for example, COVID-19 is a huge problem. Epidemiologically, it's extremely prevalent and it's extremely infectious. So it's a very epidemiologically important condition. And it also has huge economic and social ramifications. In mental health, we very much find the same with common conditions like common mental health conditions like depression or anxiety, as well as substance use disorders. So both of those, for example, are both very prevalent in the population. So they have a big public health consequence, but also they have other socioeconomic consequences as well. So this is one of the criteria that policymakers and decision makers typically use. Of course, human rights is there, and the extent to which actions reverse or address or eliminate discrimination or promote standards or practices regarding the right to health is, of course, a key issue affecting many policies. A third one is around access. This is more the kind of universal health coverage agenda. And here it's particularly referring to the extent to which people can access services. So we could say, well, health is a human right. Access to health service is in fact a human right. And this is enshrined in the kind of universal health coverage agenda, along with associated financial or social protection, so that people who have needs are able to access them without undue hardship, financial hardship on the household. And the final one I mentioned here is around costs and cost effectiveness. So this is around when considering what actions or investments or which priorities to set. Another consideration to go along with the equity or the ethical considerations is more around economic or efficiency concerns, making sure that the resources that are available in health are put to good use, and that the taxes that we'll pay are spent wisely and not wasted on technologies or actions for which there is, for example, not good evidence of effect. So I just wanted to start with that, to situate where human rights sits in the context of public health decision making more generally. So when thinking about some of the what I call strategically vital approaches to promotion and protection of mental health in the population, again, we have several approaches, not a single approach that fits all. So I'll list some of them here again, just to provide some other thoughts for your consideration. So alongside number 4, which is around a rights-based and equitable person-centered approach, which is very much at the heart of a public health approach. We also, of course, need to ensure that we pursue other approaches at the same time. So let me go upwards. So of course we all know about the need and the constant problem of intersectoral collaboration. And if we're able to do a good job as a society or as a community to protect and promote mental health, we need strong interlinkages between the relevant actors and stakeholders and government departments, and between NGOs and government entities in order to ensure a full comprehensive range of services and opportunities for people. Number 2, as I already mentioned, but we obviously need to use the evidence that is available. We don't always have the evidence that we would like to have in public mental health, but we need to be steered by the evidence as much as possible for the reason I mentioned. And finally, the life course approach is really important, and particularly when you consider that so many of the problems or consequences that we see, for example, in adulthood, actually have their genesis or their start earlier in life, in childhood or in adolescence. So it's really important that we keep that life course approach. And there are risk factors, for example, that are very different depending on where you are on the life course, at which stage of life you are in. So we need to be mindful of that and think through the different actions and interventions that need to be geared towards those different life stages. And many of these principles and criteria are encompassed in national policies and action plans and strategies, as well as international ones. I put here both the global mental health action plan. It says 2013 to 2020, but in fact it's been extended out to 2030. And then on the right, you've got the European Mental Health Action Plan, also due to expire, which is going to expire later this year. And I wanted just to flag these up to show how, alongside, the need for a positive mental health approach, mental health well-being, access to safe and effective services, human rights is very much at the core of the overarching vision or aim of these international WHO action plans. So then if I move to the how do we promote and implement that kind of rights-based approach that is so center to the vision or aim of these global as well as national level plans and strategies. I thought I'd talk about 3 specific topics quickly, so we've got time for questions and answers. I hope they're all coming in, the questions. One is around the awareness and literacy initiatives, because I think the human rights is very closely connected to the issues of stigma and discrimination, and therefore how do we restart a conversation to bring a more illuminated attitude in society, a more enlightened or informed attitude in society. And then a second topic is around the assessment and improvement of service standards, and then I'll finish with the service development side. So just one slide on each, really. On the awareness and literacy, so there's a number of, let's call them modalities that we can consider, which can help to orientate different target populations or groups towards a more rights-based approach. Part of it is around simple things, information and communication, just like in the context of COVID, providing information about how people can cope with stress, providing them suitable information about what they can do in terms of psychosocial response and care. We can do the same in the area of mental health and human rights at the level of the general population. So this is, for example, the anti-stigma and anti-discrimination campaigns that we see running in countries, sometimes for many years or decades, in fact. And unfortunately, it sometimes takes a very persistent period of information and communication for attitudes to change. You might even say a generation. But I honestly, you do see places where that has happened, and it is happening now. You do see a really remarkable change. If you think back to how things were 20 years ago or 15 years ago, it is a very different place. I'm from the United Kingdom, and it's a totally different dialogue, a different conversation that is happening around mental health now to even 10 years ago. A second is around the decision makers, because unfortunately, the truth of the matter is that policymakers might not also be very informed about what a rights-based approach looks like. So they're part of the target groups, and it's not just people working in health, but across the public sector in terms of their awareness around, for example, the UN conventions in this space, which can, for example, help ensure a mental health in all policies approach, or assist in a rights-based legislative or reform. And then two other groups at the level of communities. That's where many of the actions actually end up, right? So how to build up community level knowledge, skills, awareness. An example might be mental health first aid. And then finally, using the online digital space to also build up the capacity and knowledge of people working, for example, in the health or welfare sector. And Michel mentioned the quality rights e-training. I see that, for example, as an excellent example of a mental health awareness and literacy tool for including mental health workers, which really does provide people with a much stronger grounding in a rights-based approach to mental health. So that's why I would double up and what Michel already said, and say about suggesting that you head over there and use this tool and look at it. I think we already, through the ongoing project in Turkey, we have around 500 people registered on that platform since we launched it in December of last year. So moving to the second area around monitoring quality standards and human rights. So in the European region of WHO, we did a big project that took the toolkit and materials that Michel and colleagues had developed over a number of years, and did a project across about 24 countries of the region. And we just took a small number of institutions in each of those countries and did a full quality rights assessment to give us a sense, a profile of what is the situation in these countries. Unfortunately, the situation is not good. But until we sort of know what are the precise challenges, the main problems, that makes it harder to work out what are the things that we really need to work on. So we've gone through that process and concentrated on looking at various key dimensions of the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, which is built into this quality rights toolkit, as you can see here. And to give you a quick flavor, this is the regional results. So we looked at about 98 facilities, and there's about 25 sort of scores or standards which we are we were applying. So if you multiply 98 by 25, you get up to 2,450 ratings across all of these countries and facilities. And what we found is that only less than 30% of those ratings made by trained teams of assessors was it deemed that the standard had been actually achieved in full and in line with the CRPD. So that means 72% didn't, which is a worryingly high proportion. And you can see how it breaks down on the right-hand side of the screen across some of those key dimensions, and how you can see how some dimensions, for example, the one around legal capacity and personal liberty, and also the one on independent living, have rather larger red strips or areas, which means that this standard was not even initiated in those facilities that we assessed. And Mesut was already talking earlier about the restrictions on being able to live an independent life, and this came through very strongly in this assessment across 25 countries. Now, before I come to the Turkey results, I just give you some examples of what we were hoping. What does good standards look like? So here are some examples. So if we look for that there is that there is privacy, that people are able to enjoy privacy in these settings, and that there are individualized recovery plans available and being used to drive the treatment and care plan, and that there are, for example, legal representation is accessible and available to people, that there is clear information about what are the rights of service users. Many people living in institutions have no idea what their actual rights are, and that is something that can easily be remedied and cheaply remedied, but it's not happening in many places. And so these are some examples. I'll move on to the. This is the results in Turkey, and so more recently, finishing last year, the WHO project in Turkey on social inclusion for persons with mental disabilities did an assessment using this quality rights toolkit in 18 facilities across the country. And I think what you can see there at a glance, if you can recall this one, you will see that there is really quite similar findings. I would say slightly worse. If you look at the size of the green and the size of the red, these were slightly worse, if you like, findings, or more concerning findings than for the broader sample across the 24 other countries I was mentioning just a moment ago. So there's as I said, the value of this kind of assessments is that it gives you some very clear indications about where there is need for service improvement. And so this is the next sort of phase of work, to use the findings from that to enable a clear specification of key areas of need in terms of capacity and understanding, as well as practice. So this is what is taking place now regionally, and in the context of Turkey. I mentioned we have the EU-funded project going on now, which is administered by the WHO and for the benefit of both the Ministry of Health and the Ministry of Family, Labour and Social Services. And the three key kind of goals of this program of work is to build up a model, a national model of community-based services, to support the planning and related policies and laws for good quality, evidence-based mental health services, and also to develop the workforce, particularly with respect to person-centered care approaches. So this is actually what we've been working on, and this will be contributing, to what also Michel was mentioning about the development of person-centered and rights-based services, which, as it says here, are more focused on supporting recovery, promoting inclusion, responding to need, and avoiding coercion and coercive practices in mental health services. So I'll stop there and pass back to our moderator.
Hello again. Thank you, Dan, for the very detailed and inspiring presentation, which really helped me to imagine a rights-based transformation of mental health services. So we already have a couple of questions. If you are interested in asking questions, please send your questions directly to me. Presentations took longer than expected, as always. That's not a big problem. We will add 10 more minutes to our planned ending. So we'll end at 20 past 7 Istanbul time. So we will be allocating 20 minutes for questions and answers. Okay, let's start with the first question. I think this question is for all of our speakers, probably. The question is about the stigma around using mental health services. The question was asked with respect to refugees, but in fact, I think this is applicable to all the members of our societies. So the question is, how can we tackle the stigma around mental health support, which also limits people with mental health problems to access and approach services? Who would like to answer? Michel, Mesut. You can just, thank you.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I mean, that's a fundamental question. I mean, the stigma is a huge barrier to moving the agenda forward. And I mean, as Dan and I think all of us mentioned in our presentations, we really need to address the stigma. We need to correct the misconceptions out there in the community about what it means to have a mental health problem. So many people have mental health problems in different contexts in their life. We also need to promote respect for diversity as well. And this is, in fact, what we are trying to do through the Quality Rights Initiative and the training. We're addressing stigma and discrimination by providing better information, correct information, fighting the myths and the misconceptions out there about mental health and people who have mental health conditions and psychosocial disabilities. Also, in order to address stigma, we need to address the services that we're providing. I mean, they're stigmatizing themselves. If you've got a service which uses coercion, which does not respect the people, which is not dignified, then no one is going to want to go to that service, and then there's a whole lot of stigma which develops around it. So that's why there's not one solution. Community attitudes, information, addressing the services, addressing policy and law as well. You need to already in law change the misconception that people cannot make decisions for themselves. If the law says we cannot let people who have a mental health condition make a decision, that's saying that they're not capable. That means you're stigmatizing that person, and you're imposing things that are not true on that person. Yes, people can make decisions. So the law can then stigmatize people as well. So that also needs to be changed. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Michelle. Would you like to add anything, Mesut Bey, or then? Okay. I'm moving to...
I can
please.
add a little bit. I mean, I touched on this under when I was talking about mental health awareness and literacy, and that a lot of that is geared towards, as I said, stigma and discrimination. So I think the approach, you know, broadly is multi-level. It needs to be, you know, different groups within society, but also multi-method and multimedia. So that, again, to reach different groups through different ways. So embedding a character in the most popular soap opera in the country could be a great way, okay, for some people, you know, to help to relate and see a story played out in front of them. Actually, the most evidence-based, you know, the evidence in this area indicates that really approaches that bring people face to face, you know, personal contact with people who have lived experience is the most powerful, the most effective way. Just as having other information campaigns. So I think this, you know, multi-method approach is important, of course. And having champions, people like Mesut, who are willing and wanting to speak out about their experience and what happened to them, and being able to express their position, give their voice within policy, within practice, within society is extremely important. So supporting these different processes and investing in them is actually, over some period of time, is a kind of a necessary, you know, approach, you know, strategy. Can't be done in a quick, oh, let's do a quick campaign in the next 6 months and expect to change, you know, the population's attitudes overnight.
Thank you, Dan.
One other point would be that COVID-19, because of the enormous mental health consequences that it has had already and will actually continue to have, it's a real opportunity to broaden the debate. And so this is a particular opportunity that could be taken to engage communities and talking about psychosocial needs, emotional needs of communities in this time, how to build resilience. So I think, you know, that's another important opportunity that's presented itself. Over.
Mesut Bey, you were going to tell something. Okay.
Söz kimde şu an?
Sizde.
Ha, bizde mi? Şimdi gerçekten çok olumlu, güzel bir toplantı oldu benim. Gerçekten bütün konulara değinildi gibi geldi bana. Ama en önemlisi bunların içinde stigma konusuydu. Biz dernekte yıllardır güzel örneklerle, güzel çalışmalarla kendimizi topluma lanse ediyoruz. Üniversitelere gidiyoruz, öğrencilere anlatıyoruz. Şizofreni hastalığını ve herkes çok başarılı olduğumuzu, tedavimizin düzenli gittiğinde çok şeylerin düzeldiğine inanıyorlar ama bir yıl içinde basında çıkan olumsuz bir haber, şizofreniyle ilgili çıkan olumsuz haber bütün bizim çalışmalarımızı yok ediyor ve tekrardan başlıyoruz imajı düzeltmek için. Öyle bir ciddi bir sorunumuz var. Psikolojik bir şey bu. İnsanlardan çok suçlamak istemiyorum. Bilmedikleri şeylerden korkuyorlar ama bence hani bu tür güzel örneklerle, mesela bu tür çalışmalarla toplumu kendimize anlatmak, basın yoluyla, diğer yollarla veya eğitim sisteminde erken yaşlarda bu konuların konuşulması ve insanların kulaklarının aşina olması gerekiyor bu tür rahatsızlıklara karşı. Bilmedikleri için yani kesinlikle sadece isimden korkan insanları tanıyorum. Hani hastalığın hiçbir şeyini bilmiyorlar ama şizofreni dendiği zaman sizden uzaklaşan insanlar var. Dediğim gibi hani bu eğitimle olur, televizyon dizileriyle olur, başka araçlarla olur ve biz yaşadığımız sürece bu çalışmanın içinde olmamız gerekiyor. Yılmadan. Dediğim gibi bazen olumsuz bir olay bütün çalışmayı berbat ediyor ama tekrar yılmadan bir şeyleri düzeltmek gerekiyor. Yaşam boyu belki bu böyle devam edecek. Ondan işimiz çok zor. Ondan devletten destek istiyoruz. Yani bu destekler olursa ancak bu sorunları aşabileceğiz. Yoksa hastaların verdiği medikal tedavimiz var. O bir zorluk teşkil ediyor. İşsizlik var. Okul, üniversite sorunları var. Okula devam edemiyorsunuz. Bir de bu olumsuzluklar da üst üste bindiği zaman tam böyle bir ızdırap dolu bir hayatla karşı karşıya kalıyoruz. Biz dernek olarak yıllardır bununla başa çıkmaya çalışıyoruz. Ve çok güzel de bir sosyal ortam oluşturduk dediğim gibi. Bunun yaygınlaşması, Türkiye genelinde, dünya genelinde yaygınlaşması gerekiyor. Birçok örnekler var yurt dışında. Bizde de belki bir örnek başka ülkeler için var. Bunların bir noktadan tespit edilip ortak bir kullanım haline getirmemiz gerekiyor. Yani sorunumuz evrensel bir sorun aslında. Yani yerelde yaşadıklarımız tamam. Ama bütün dünya aynı sorunları yaşıyor. Belki birlikte bunları çözebiliriz. Dışarıdaki örnekleri alabiliriz. Bu belki bize kolaylaştırıcı olacak bu çalışma içinde. Dediğim gibi benim yani dernek olarak fazla maddi gücümüz yok. Sizleri toplamak, toplantı yapmak gibi böyle bir şansımız yok. Keşke olsaydı da bunları enine boyuna konuşabilseydik. Birçok sorun var. Bence hani şeyi de çok kutluyorum. Sağlık örgütünü bu konulara değindikleri için. Gerçekten hani onlar gündeme getirmese belki de biz yıllarca bunları konuşmayacağız. O anlamda çok değer veriyorum bu çalışmalara. Söyleyeceğim bunlar. İnşallah gelecekte ortak bir çalışma içine gireriz. Ben her şeyi söylemek durumunda değilim. Birçok benim gibi sorun yaşayan arkadaşlarım da dinlensin, aileler dinlensin, uzmanlarla birlikte bir elimizde bir sonuç olsun ve bunu talep edelim veya isteyelim veya hayata geçmesi için çalışalım. Dediğim gibi çalışma konusu, barınma konusu birçok ihtiyaçlarımız var. Anne babamız diyor ki bizi korkutuyorlar aslında. Yarın öbür gün biz öleceğiz, biz öldükten sonra sizler ne yapacaksınız? Size kim bakacak diye bizi korkutuyorlar. Biz de geleceğimizi görmek, güvenmek, ileride onları kaybettiğimizde kurumun bize sahip çıktığını bilmek bizi rahatlatacaktır. Bu anlamda ben bugünden yarının mücadelesini vermek istiyorum. Böyle bir gerçekle karşı karşıyayız. Ve milyonlarca insan bu böyle. Herhalde Türkiye'de 8 milyon engelli vatandaş var. Birçoğu aynı şeyleri düşünüyor. Psikiyatrik rahatsızlığı olan da herhalde 1 milyona yakın insan var Türkiye'de. Geleceğe kaygıyla bakıyorlar. Bu kaygıları gidermek için bu yapılan çalışma bence çok anlamlı ve olumlu bir fırsat bizim için. Buna işte uzmanlarımızın kafa yorması gerekiyor. Ben hani çok bu konuda şey değilim, çok yetkili değilim. Birlikte bence hani bunları geliştirmek gerekiyor. Söyleyeceklerim bunlar. Şimdiden teşekkür ediyorum yine herkese.
Teşekkürler. We have 10 minutes left, so I'm going to group some questions and ask to all of you and give you another round of talk responses, and then we can wrap up in the end. So one question is about involuntary hospitalizations. The question was about whether international conventions, I think here we have to mention CRPD, restricts involuntary hospitalization, and what is the point, what is the international human rights point of view on involuntary hospitalization and the rights of people with mental health problems who are involuntarily hospitalized. The other question is, how can we tackle the stigma around mental health professionals, which is the elephant in the room generally. So the human rights approach is not always very much popular among mental health professionals in many countries. So how can we promote human rights approach among mental health professionals is another question. I think the last question was to Mesut Bey about to what extent, Mesut Bey, can you participate in policy making processes? You can tell us your own experiences about your and your organization's participation in the preparation of mental health law, which couldn't still pass in the Turkish parliament. Thank you very much. Michelle? Yeah, please unmute yourself. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, great. So knowing the limitation of the time, I'll try to be very quick with the response to those questions. Yes, the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities states very clearly that we need to end involuntary admission, involuntary treatment, involuntary hospitalization. And it's looking to different processes by which we can do that. And I think the key factor here is the need to respect people's will and preference. And that can be done through a number of different mechanisms. I think there's an acknowledgement out there that sometimes not everyone is able to express their will and preference in any particular moment. That can happen to any, but still the will and preference should be respected. That can be done through supported decision-making preferences. A person has a group of people who know them, who understand their will and preference, and that group can be brought in to help understand what that person wants. In situations where they may be in a crisis, so we need to make more use of those mechanisms. Also advanced directives where people can specify if they're in a crisis, they're for some reason not able to communicate their will and preference, that they specify in advance what they would like to happen if they are in a crisis situation. If they want, who they want to be involved, who they don't want to be involved, which hospital, what medication, no medication, and so on. So there are different options to avoid the situation of involuntary hospitalization, and we need to make use of those mechanisms. Countries to date are not doing so. The question on stigma of mental health professionals, we need to address stigma overall, and we need to, so that needs to be addressed in the context of anti-stigma campaigns, education awareness campaigns, but we also, once we are able to change the practice of the profession and the attitudes within the profession itself, and stop coercion, stop violence and abuse, which is happening in the services, move towards respect of legal capacity, full human rights, then we change the stigma around the profession as well. Thank you very much.
You're welcome, Michelle. Let's keep the same order. Dan?
Fine. So I would just add a bit to what Michelle was just saying on the second question. Thanks for all the questions. About the mental health professions, I think I do three things. One, encourage a broader maybe understanding, or a different, present a slightly broader approach. So moving away from a purely biomedical approach and understanding of mental health and mental health problems or illness to a broader bio-psycho-social environmental approach, which would particularly maybe emphasize the key drivers, determinants, or risks to mental health. Because this really helps to understand why people become stressed, distressed, or ill. So I think that's for me, the starting point for this. And then, of course, to provide, secondly, training, retraining, in-service training opportunities. We mentioned one today, which is around the e-training. But of course, there are several other materials that can be provided or offered to professionals to build up their competencies in different areas. And the final one would be, I think, the power of evidence, and coming back to what Michelle was just saying about user preferences, but also user outcomes. So using science, using evidence-based approaches to document not just clinical effects, but social effects, the impact of different modalities of care on outcomes that are of interest to users, which include social functioning, employment, social participation, these kind of outcomes, and demonstrating through that a community-based, person-centered, rights-based approach is the one to go for. Over.
Thank you, Dan. Mesut Bey, söz sizde.
Evet, yani çok doğru, bu stigmayla bayağı bir uğraşacağız galiba bunları hallettikten sonra. Belki hani diyorum tekrardan sizden böyle bir geniş bir çalışma alanı yaratmanızı istiyorum. Hep birlikte bu konuları enine boyuna konuşalım ve takipçisi olalım. Var olduğumuz sürece mücadele edeceğiz. Bu kesin. Ben de hiç bıkmadan fırsat oldukça anlatmaya çalışıyorum durumumuzu. İnşallah birilerine faydası olacağını düşünüyorum. O anlamda benim için çok önemli bu. Başka herhangi bir beklentim yok. Sadece dediğim gibi bu yıllardır yaşadığım sıkıntıların başka insanlar tarafından yaşanmaması konusunda çok hassasım. İnşallah diyorum hani bu şeyler daha da iyi olacak. Sizlere tekrar teşekkür ediyorum.
Çok teşekkürler. We'll end this webinar with this hopeful note. So thank you very much. Mesut Bey, buyurun. Söz sizde.
Efendim?
Bir şey söyleyecektiniz diye düşündüm ama söylemeyecektiniz.
Aslında problemleri çözmek çok basit ama işte düşünürken basit geliyor bana, pratiğe koymak onu. Hayata geçirmek ve uygulamak bir emek istiyor. Ve takip istiyor, onu söylemek istiyorum. Yani uluslararası haklarımız var, yasal haklarımız var. Bunların birçoğu Türkiye'de uygulanıyor fakat yani takip gerekiyor. Mutlaka sahip çıkmak lazım alana, ihtiyaçlarımıza. Bilinçli bir toplum olmamız gerekiyor. Ya başkaları uğraşıyor, ben uğraşmıyorum dediğimiz zaman, yalnız bırakıldığımız zaman hiçbir sonuç elde edemiyoruz. Onun için tüm katmanlar, bu sorunu yaşayan aileler, hastalar ve uzmanların birlikte bu sorunu çözeceğine inanıyorum ben. Yani basit bir şey. Ama işte uygulama çok zor.
Çok teşekkürler. Thank you very much, Mesut Bey. I would like to apologize for all of you whose questions couldn't be accommodated in this question and answer session. Sorry about that. I couldn't do that because of time limitations. I would like to thank all of our speakers, Michel, Dan, Mesut Bey, for joining us today. And also all of the organizers, Boğaziçi University Social Policy Forum's Research Assistants Coordinator, WHO Turkey Office, Şebnem Hanım, Akfer Hanım, çok teşekkürler. And our translators as well. Hope to see you again in another webinar. Thank you.